Good evening, listeners, viewers. It's lovely to be back with you again. And we've got an action-packed, dynamic show tonight. We're covering 3 topics and more if you ring in and want to share your news with us. So this is the Tuesday show. My name's Jenny Fisher. I'm the editor of East London News. And you can see on the screen the number that we want you to ring in on to talk about tonight's topics or ask our guest a question or put forward a concern of your own, tell us something that we don't know. It's a two-way process. So let me introduce now my studio guest. This is Dr. Jingy Alum. There you are. You went away for a moment. You turned it into a little rotation. But it's lovely to have you back in person. I've been trying to get you on for a little while, so it's great to see you now. And we're going to spend the first half hour or so of the programme talking about COVID. Boris Johnson has issued a statement today with his usual incisive clarity. So apparently, COVID remains a risk. It is either gone or it's not gone. Boris Johnson is very clear. Those are the alternatives. So he's carrying on his usual clarity with that. But before we quite get to COVID, I'm always intimidated by doctors, but let me try to chill a little bit. Jingy, being a doctor, it's rubbish. It's awful. It's really hard. It's really low paid. You study for ages. You've got a massive loan, and you have to have an A-level chemistry. I can't imagine anything worse. So, tell me, what drew you into medicine? What turned you into a doctor?
Oh, Jenny, I think yeah, the A-level in chemistry was quite tricky. I don't know how I managed to get past that barrier. But so for me, it all started when I was the deputy young mayor of Tower Hamlets in quite some time ago. And I sat on the Health and Wellbeing Board at the borough. And at the Health and Wellbeing Board, I learned of one statistic, that people of Tower Hamlets died 7 years earlier than people who lived in West London. And as a young boy, I just couldn't figure out why that was and how unfair that was. And so I went home and I started doing my own research. And I thought the best way to help narrow that gap was to become a doctor. I mean, we all know that wasn't or isn't the best way to do that. But at the time, I thought, yes. And public health has been quite central to my drive in being a doctor. I trained at Southampton as an undergrad.
Oh dear, we're having a lot of problems with your connection, Jingy, which is tragic. Yes, let's keep going and see if it clears up. We keep sort of dropping off. But anyway, you're telling us you trained at Southampton, which is certainly quite a distance from London.
At Southampton Medical School, and then I went off to the Midlands to do the first years of my doctor training after I gained my qualification. And when the first wave hit, I was working in Leicester, and I felt it was my duty to work as a doctor through the pandemic. But I couldn't help but think at the back of my mind, I've done this to go back to East London to work in my own community, to work to serve my community. And it was towards the end of the first wave when I decided to pack my bags and move back down to Tower Hamlets, to East London. And just as I moved back, things started. There was that awful Eat Out to Help Out initiative. And everyone thought life was good and everything was going back to normal. And then the numbers started going up again and the death rate started going up again. And I started working in the trust that I was born in East London. And I was seeing some really, really awful cases. But one of the most satisfying things in my job was that I could say to a patient, don't worry, I'm one of your own. I'm one of your own. At times I meet Bengali patients who don't speak English, and Jenny, the relief on their face when you say in in Bengali, you say to them, "Don't worry, I speak Bengali. We will look after you." Because quite often, hospitals are scary places for people who can speak English, but to go to a hospital, to be in that very vulnerable state and not be able to communicate must be terrifying. And so those are the sort of things that drive me. Those are the sort of things that drive me and keep me going. But you're right, the rest of it is quite tough.
So what did it actually feel like when, as the pandemic grew and you saw wave after wave of patients coming in? I mean, we mustn't forget, now we have hindsight, but then we didn't know what was going to happen. We saw what happened in Italy. Were we going to be the same? So how did it actually feel to be fighting in a hospital environment?
I mean, it was relentless, Jenny. When it first kicked off, I was working in a GP practice. At the very first case in December 2019, I was working in a GP practice, and me and my GP colleague we're talking about this thing called coronavirus, this thing called COVID-19. And as things got worse and worse, the workforce planning changed, and all doctors were sent to the front line. So whether it's intensive care or A&E, and so I started working in A&E. And as things got worse in the UK, the first 3 doctors who died from COVID were from ethnic minority backgrounds. And I kept thinking to myself, hold on, I could be one of those guys. I could be the next person, the next doctor who gets COVID and dies from COVID. And so it was quite terrifying. No one really knew how to treat it. No one really knew, like, we didn't have the steroids back then, or some of the antivirals we use now, or the knowledge that we have now, or a vaccine, in fact. So it was quite scary. I then, I went into this mode where I just ignored everything around me, including the news and whatnot, and I just focused on my clinical work, and it's just focused on going to work and just trying to take every day as it came. And I lived with 2 other doctors at the time, and we were all doing the same thing. And it was until a colleague of mine who I worked with quite some time ago rang me and said, have you seen these patterns emerging? People from ethnic backgrounds, doctors and healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, porters, ethnic people are dying disproportionately from this virus. We need to do something about it.
Why was that such a surprise to the NHS? Even in the early days, we knew that it was, poverty and disease, prior conditions led the death rate. So why was that?
I think it was less of a surprise. It was more of the fact that, this pandemic we're deep into this pandemic. People are dying disproportionately. We need to act. We need to do something, and the dynamics of the healthcare system changed. People wanted to engage. People wanted to help. And it was a weird stage. It felt as if there was an unlimited amount of resource to do things. There was an unlimited pot of money to do things. And people, over the 18-20 months, I've met some incredible people who really, really did want to help change and engage with us. And I remember speaking to journalists at Newsnight or at BBC Asian Network, on daytime TV, trying to bang on about these disparities and inform policymakers and influence policy where I can. Firstly, it was around safety of staff, how we can ensure people had appropriate PPE, how we could ensure people had appropriate sick pay if they did need to isolate. And then the vaccine then came out, and it was a huge relief. As soon as I read about the vaccine, I was there, queuing to be one of the first to get the vaccine. Obviously, I had to wait my turn, but I think it was within the first 4 or 5 weeks of the vaccine being out or being distributed in England. I managed to get one on my birthday, and over that Christmas period, there was a lot of hesitancy in the community, and it really did. It didn't take me by surprise, Jenny. I'll be honest with you. It didn't take me by
Mm.
surprise, but it really did put me in a difficult position, because I knew people in my community in East London, and I don't just mean people as in rich Bangladeshi people. I meant generally people in East London were dying disproportionately. Ethnic minority groups.
So we've got two things here then. We've got the fear that Black and ethnic minority people were suffering and dying disproportionately, and then we've got vaccine take-up. In terms of the sort of disproportionate effect, do you think the NHS has really come to terms with that? Has it grasped the sort of inherent discrimination in its policies? Are we going to see improvement?
I think, to be honest with you, Jenny, I think this has been a huge wake-up call. When I first went into some of these roundtables and some of these discussions with colleagues, with policymakers, a lot of the things we were talking about weren't new. We weren't coming up with novel solutions. These solutions, like you said, people have been banging on about these things. People have been campaigning for these things for decades. I remember when some politicians first started talking about these ethnic disparities as if they were new, novel ideas. But if you look at Runnymede Trust, they've had data on ethnic disparities and racism for decades, since the 90s, since the 80s. And it's just that you've chosen to ignore that until now, where this is so complex that it doesn't just affect one ethnic group, it affects everyone. So we have to make sure that everyone is safe. And I think that's what made people listen. It was that everyone needed to be safe for one person to be safe.
Yeah, I think that's been a great leveler. And I think also it must be invaluable to have somebody from the community that's being treated actually cross the bridge and become a professional. I've said this on the programme before. I remember some meeting at Queen Mary, although this is 20 years ago, talking about how to encourage more students in East London to become medical students. And one of the doctors present sort of woke up and said, "Hang on, you're talking about them coming here to study to be doctors?" And seemed to do that. And I just wanted to intervene. Of course, you couldn't. But I just wanted to say, oh, you want to just carry on being ill to keep you on your consultant's pay then, do you? It was very cheeky of him.
It's interesting because I studied medicine through a widening participation program, through a social mobility program. And everyone talks about the benefits of the program being a benefit to the individual. That individual has been given opportunities to prosper, but we forget that there's a huge benefit to society. And having people, and I'm just an example of an individual from East London, but we've got deprived communities up in the north, up in Mid Wales, North Wales, and we need doctors there as well. And patients listen to doctors who look like them, who talk like them, who understand them. And often I find myself having to educate some of my colleagues at work who don't come from a similar background, but meet a patient who might come from my background, and have to explain to those colleagues that when not everyone is as privileged as you. And sometimes you just and it's beneficial for people around you as well.
And sometimes privilege needn't be very great. I'll come back to that, but I just want to interrupt to say that Sean Malik, who was a guest on our show a few weeks ago, we were talking about sport in Tower Hamlets, has said hi. He said it's great to see one of my former students making a difference within the world of field. So hello.
Yeah, Mr. Malik taught me geography as a young boy.
Did he? Oh, right.
Yeah.
I don't suppose you can give us any gossip. No, this is wrong base for gossip. We're very glad that Mr. Malik did so well with you, and your geography has improved. Yes, no, I was just going to say that I bumped into Dr. Shoman Banerjee. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. In the town hall a few years ago, and he told me very proudly that he was on his way to a health and wellbeing board, and they were going to spend a whole meeting talking about increasing take up of the breast cancer screening for the over 50s or over 55s, whichever it is. And I just said, well, why are you spending a whole meeting discussing it? You've just introduced this move to Barts. You're expecting everyone now to go and be screened at Barts. Barts is miles away. We've no idea where it is. You've got to get on the tube. You can't just walk there or get on the bus. Bring it back to Mile End, you'll double your numbers. Well, there you are, free advice. I don't know. I have no idea if he took that advice. But breast cancer screening is now taking place at Mile End and seems to me to be very busy. I had to change an appointment there a couple of years ago, and it was very difficult to get rebooked. So for a time I can make. So there we are. That's all about being local and living it. Yeah.
Jenny, to that story, similarly, when we all sat down over the Christmas period last year, and we said, how are we going to get all of these people, all of these vulnerable people, all of these high risk people to accept and get vaccinated? We need to make it as easy as possible for people. We need to ask them how to do that. And one of the initiatives we worked on was collaborating with the local mosques. So, a few colleagues and myself, we came together and we said, if we can get East London Mosque on board, that would resonate across the country, not just in East London. And East London Mosque, they were brilliant. They do a lot of community work, and they were brilliant to work on with this. One of the imams did a Q&A with myself, talking about vaccines for BBC Asian Network. Again, BBC Asian Network were fantastic over the pandemic, trying to make sure that communities were able to access public health messaging in their own languages. And so, like we were trying to make things as easy as possible, as accessible as possible for people.
Let me just remind viewers that we're not going to be here all night. So if you've got a question for Jingy, do ring in or put a comment on Facebook. I think we're having quite a nice conversation anyway, so you may just be listening. And I know there's a couple of vaccine skeptics out there, and you are welcome to come on and put your point of view, and Jingy will answer it. So, be a devil's advocate. You're welcome to ring in and speak, or to put a comment on Facebook. But let's come back to this vaccine. I mean, basically, you're saying that given the disproportionate way Black and ethnic minority communities were suffering from COVID, they had to be reached with the vaccine, and there were these problems in reaching those communities. Have we overcome them? Is there still resistance?
I think there's always going to be resistance. There's always going to be people who are hesitant and people who are anti. And it was the people who were hesitant that I wanted to make sure had the most accurate information. There was so much out there. We got into a very risky position where politicians were announcing science. When doctors and scientists announce science, the public believe them. The public, they're some of the most trusted professions. When politicians start announcing science, that's when things get a bit sticky. And, it was our job to make sure that the public could ask any question, no matter how large or small, about the vaccine, inform themselves of the side effects, inform themselves of the risks and benefits of getting vaccinated, and to make sure that it was as easy as possible for them to get vaccinated. And I remember reaching out to influencers across Instagram and messaging hundreds of them saying, do you fancy doing a quick Instagram live Q&A with your followers? I can't pay you because I'm doing this in my free time, but this will be beneficial for so many people. And often, Jenny, I met patients who would say, please don't tell my son or my daughter that I got vaccinated, because they've told me not to. And it was a large scale problem. And I think a lot of it was people were overwhelmed with the amount of information that was coming at them, and some of the misinformation looked very legitimate, and so you didn't know what to believe and what to what to dismiss. But then, like I said, there was a small minority of people who were extremely passionately against the vaccine. And no matter how much you tried to show them or educate them with the science, the same scientific journals and platforms that we use to practice day-to-day medicine across the country, they just wouldn't have it. They just would not accept it, and you just can't win that battle with people. And I know there are a few rare occasions over the last 9 to 10 months where people have sent me death threats because they believe that I'm trying to kill their community, because they believe I'm part of this hidden agenda or this new world order. And it's saddening, it's fearful, but as a doctor, it's my duty to make sure the public are safe and the public are well informed when making those decisions.
And people get so carried away, don't they? I mean, if you watch a lot of the Tuesday show, you'll see we don't have a lot of guests from Newham. And one of the reasons is that a group of people in Newham came to believe that the 5G phone masts were spreading the virus and did a lot of damage and wrecked them to stop the virus. And so a lot of people in Newham that we would love to have on the show have actually got rubbish internet at home. And, so all that has been stopped because I don't know if I agree with you 100% on the vaccine. I think there are some people, my take, which is not scientific, is that there are some people who are just so scared of having a vaccine, maybe they've not had one before ever, that they grasp at all sorts of folklore to try and justify not actually going. But the root is not that they believe the folklore, it's that they just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I remember when my son was, when I had my baby, which was about 30 years ago, I went in for his first vaccine, and the doctor sort of said, "Okay, now I just want to explain to you, vaccines are quite safe." And all that. And I said to him, "Just hang on, what's the risk? Actual percentage risk?" And he told me it. And because I'd just been pregnant, obviously, I knew the percentage risks of being pregnant. I didn't remember them now. And so I just said to the doctor, "So this vaccine is actually less risky than being pregnant." I didn't worry about having a baby. I just had the baby because I wanted a baby. So let's approach it in the same way. You've got to get it in proportion.
And I think similarly, that's how I portrayed the information about clots. There was a huge scare about clots in March, April time, and I tried to put things into proportion for people, give them a perception that if you had COVID, if you had severe COVID, you had 1 in 6 chances of developing clots. If you were pregnant, you had a higher chance of developing clots from pregnancy than from this vaccine. Or if you were on combined hormonal oral contraception, your risk was higher. But people get pregnant every day, and people take contraceptive pills every day. And so it was a difficult challenge, but you just have to show people how they can relate to those statistics, because 3 in a million is difficult to grasp in your head. What does 3 in a million look like? So you have to make it look, or make the information digestible. And I think that's one of the biggest public health messages or public health lessons that we learned over the last almost 2 years, is that what we felt was the correct way of communicating certainly was not the correct way of communicating with people. And you need to make that information digestible and appropriate for every audience. It's not just one size fits all.
Do you worry that, I was quite surprised when they started saying recently that the efficacy of vaccines was dropping off now that we've all been vaccinated for a while. They're finding resistance is reducing, and we now all have to have boosters, which is not how it was sold. When you get a vaccine, you get 1 or 2 doses, and that's pretty much it. But now we have to have boosters after just 6 months. How that is not a positive message. How can we sell the idea of boosters? Are they a good idea? I mean,
I think we have to firstly change the public narrative. At the beginning of this conversation, Jenny, you spoke about Boris Johnson saying, it's either here or gone, or it's here, it's either here or gone. We need to change the public message to we have to find a safe way to live with COVID, as we do with the flu. And every year we take the flu jab based on the variants in Australia and New Zealand, on that side of the world. And so we need to change the narrative to we will have COVID for a while. It's just how do we safely live with COVID? And that might be booster jabs once a year for the unforeseeable future, or that might be other measures. But if we continue to tell people we're trying to eradicate COVID and then offer them a jab, a booster jab, and then another booster jab, people are just, people are going to get bored of this message. People are going to disengage, and the uptake's going to be poorer and poorer. So we have to change the narrative on this now.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And now, what's your opinion of the vaccination for 12 to 15-year-olds? I think that's worried a lot of people, because we were told young people don't get it. So what's the deal there?
There was I think it's difficult because there were 3 different messages, and it's come from 3 different organizations. And so if we look at the MHRA, which is the organization or the government body that assesses risk and benefits to an individual, so safety essentially, they get asked one question, which is the vaccine safe? And they said, yes, the vaccine's safe. And then the JCVI assess risk and benefit at a population level, focusing on the benefits and health. So they were saying there's marginal health benefits, and they don't think that it's necessarily we need to vaccinate the 12 to 15-year-olds. But then the CMOs, the 4 CMOs, decided it was beneficial in terms of focusing on public health impact, so mental health and school attendance. So I think the last few days for a layperson, for any member of the public, again, an overwhelming amount of information coming from all different directions with all different messages. But I think we need to make sure young people, school pupils, are safe, and they get their appropriate education at this time of their lives. We need to also make sure that schools are safe from anti-vaxxers who may believe. I read an article in the BBC this evening, in fact, that school head teachers have been threatened with legal action by anti-vaxxers, and we need to make sure that school staff are safe. We need to make sure young people are safe. If young people believe or want to get vaccinated, they have a right to get vaccinated, but it gets complicated if they want to get vaccinated against the choice of their parents. We need proper policy, proper safeguarding policy to make sure that those young people are safe. And Jenny, a lot of the time, like you said, people are fearful, and it's genuine fear. But we have to acknowledge that there is going to be a small cohort of parents who are passionately against this vaccine and will do everything to stop their child getting vaccinated. And if that child wants to get vaccinated, it becomes a very tricky situation. So we need, it's not going to be that easy. We need a proper safeguarding policy for schools to follow and to adhere to. And like I said, making sure that schools are safe.
I mean, well, I could only hope that Hamlets Council and the other councils in East London and the public health bodies will come together and work out how to put this message across positively in schools. Yes, I mean, I'm just looking here at one of my WhatsApp groups, and there's a Lawyers for Liberty circulating messages.
I think we share a lot of mutual WhatsApp groups. So
yes,
quite often I'm a silent observer, and I just like to know how, because it's dangerous being in an echo chamber. And so it's good to know how other people are thinking and how we can support those people.
But this is encouraging parents to, to warn head teachers that there are legal risks to them forcing children to get the vaccine. And we're not talking about anybody being forced, are we?
Absolutely.
So I just think we're in for another battle. People in Tower Hamlets seem, and more widely in East London, but less so, seem to have this gift for generating heat rather than light, I think, and that's something we need to work against. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, sadly. I could go on for much longer on this, but I'm not going to keep you here all evening, and we've got a couple of other issues to follow. But we were just before we were coming on air that you mentioned that you run an eye charity in Bangladesh, and I'd love for you just to say a couple of words about how that came about and what it is.
Yeah, so I'm quite interested in ophthalmology, which is the medical specialty or surgical specialty around eyes. And so I approached a colleague of mine who I've been working with in Bangladesh for about 6 years now for an organization called Selfless UK. And he said, you have my full support to go out to Bangladesh and set this organization up. And the organization is called Porishkar, and it means clear in Bengali. And that's how patients describe their vision as soon as they had their procedure. And we target people who've lost their jobs because they have lost their vision. And so they have no income and end up in poverty. The kids aren't educated and it's just a horrible, horrible life. So we target those people to make sure we restore their vision and help them get back into work so that they can be empowered to be independent and nourish basically and prosper. And so that's what we do in Bangladesh. We're based in Sylhet, around rural Bangladesh. We've been doing it for about probably two years now, just this particular project, minus some of the hiccups from the pandemic. But so yeah, that's just a summary of what we do. We also do stuff around dental hygiene and antenatal care in Bangladesh.
It's fascinating to think that you think of doctors and you think of perhaps some sacrifice, personal sacrifice during the pandemic, and we thank the NHS for everyone who works for it for working so hard during the COVID pandemic. And then we find out that people like yourself have this little sideline, which is just helping even more people than we thought you were. So maybe you can, if you ever go out there and get some footage, maybe we can sort of have a dialogue about that. I'd love to see more about it and see what healthcare is like in Bangladesh. And maybe I'm sure you do fundraising in East London for this charity, but one thing that there isn't a lot of is collection of spectacles. I think it is possible if you have older relatives who've passed on to donate their spectacles, but I think it's quite complicated. And I don't know if somewhere like somewhere central like the East London Mosque or one of the hospitals could possibly help by collecting spectacles that people want to donate.
That's a really good idea, actually, Jenny. I might just nick that idea. That is a brilliant idea. Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that.
Because I think a lot of spectacles, particularly reading spectacles like these, are quite common, aren't they? They're not going to suit everybody if they're prescription glasses, but they could be useful. So lovely, that's great. Jangi, thank you ever so much for coming on. It was a great conversation, and hopefully, as I say, we'll keep in touch and see you again soon. But for now, thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Jenny.
You're welcome. Okay. Now somebody's going to press a button and you're now going to disappear. Lovely. Okay. Right. We're just going to cover two other topics now. And we're going to show you a short film in a second. Last week we had Sam Patel, talking about all the protests going on in East London against the arms fair. We've just spent half an hour talking about keeping people alive. And while we've been talking at the Excel Centre in Newham, there's a load of people talking about how to kill them again, which seems absurd. But that's what they're doing down there. So there was been demonstrations over the last few days, and we're going to play you now a video of Rob Ferguson from. Although this is a general arms fair, a lot of it is to do with arms in the Middle East. So Palestine Solidarity Committee have been playing a leading part in organising and helping with the protests, which have gone very well. And here's Rob Ferguson explaining why he's motivated to protest and urging you to come out on the next demonstration, which is on Thursday evening. So if we can play the video now, please do watch, because this really is from the front line.
Thanks. There is something obscene that on the anniversary of the horrific attack of 9/11, the world's biggest arms fair should be held here in our borough. It was the foreign policies of the United States, supported by Britain and NATO, that created the conditions for terrorism. The United States, as the world's one remaining superpower, had been itching for a fight in the Middle East for years, long before 9/11. And they used 9/11 as a pretext to launch a war for US dominance in the region. And it is the warmongers and arms dealers just a few miles in the south of this borough who fueled the obscene weaponry and technology of mass slaughter that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of innocent people, that has fueled a vast growth in terror and forced millions of refugees to flee their homes, to risk their lives and those of their families in the most desperate journeys for survival. And let's not forget the tide of Islamophobia and racism their war on terror has generated. The terror attacks of the far right that we have seen here in our own borough. The vicious acid attack by the fascist John Tomlin in 2017, just 1 mile from the arms fair site. And now Priti Patel and the Tories, rather than provide sanctuary for the victims of their wars, want to use gunboats to turn desperate people back across the dangerous waters of the Channel, risking yet more lives. Newham is home to refugees from those wars and conflicts, from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Iraq, from Palestine, and from many more. The arms fair, this jamboree of death, is a threat to us all. It is, of course, first a threat to the direct victims of their wars, but it is a threat to our community and communities. And let us not forget in all this, Palestine. One of the key exhibitors is Elbit Systems, Israel's largest weapons company. Elbit's killer drones are used on the civilian population of Gaza. In 2014, 37% of Palestinian fatalities were killed using drone strikes, 497 civilians and 164 children. We need to draw inspiration from our movement. It's our movement that can stop the drive to war. We need to make sure that there are no more jamborees of death here in London or in Liverpool or in anywhere else. The fantastic demonstrations for Palestine in May and the great anti-war movement should be our inspiration. And we have a responsibility to our community. I think the council, Newham Council, need to step up. They have opposed the arms fair, but we need to do much, much more. And we have wider responsibility to the movement and to the victims of war. We're organising here in East London. There's a PSC stall over there. Please sign up. If you're in East London, join East London PSC. And we need to build for Thursday the 16th at 6:30 on Cundy Park. No more arms jamborees and no more bloody war.
Free, free! Free, free!
Rob, outlining the absurdity of sorry, I put my earphones back in because I was actually sneaking a quick listen to that very good speech. If we can just show the demonstration details now, the little poster about the demonstration on Thursday. As Rob said, it's Cundy Park in Newham where the demonstration is beginning. It's on Thursday. It's called Resist DSEI, DSEI, I call it, but not everyone does. Stop Arming Israel. And this particular demonstration on Thursday is led by Palestinian and Palestinian Solidarity activists. Thursday, 16th of September, 6:30. I don't know if we can show this little graphic on screen so that people can see the details, but 6:30 at Cundy Park in E13. Yes, that's the one. Cundy Park in E13, and you can see there's a range of Palestinian speakers, so that should be interesting. And I would say, to people across East London, let's all go to Newham. Let's all listen in to what's going on and show some practical solidarity. And then let's not forget about that. There are active East London PSC groups in all the East London boroughs now, in Redbridge, in Newham, in Tower Hamlets. And maybe those groups can discuss what they can do on an ongoing basis to approach councils, perhaps to boycott Excel as an exhibition centre, and to even approach some of the private companies exhibiting there, asking them not to come back to Excel until Excel refuses to host the arms fair. Would seem to be a just demand. So I just wanted to sort of share that speech with you and share the details of that demonstration. If you'd like to comment about it, please comment on the comments box and I'll read that out, or you can ring in. But while you're thinking about whether to overcome your shyness about joining us, there's one more topic that we want to go on to, and if we could just show the photograph that I took earlier today. There's a photograph here which we'd like to show you, and be very interested to see if you can guess what this actually is. If we can go to the photograph of the people sat in a room, if that's possible. There we are. Now, dear viewer, you're an experienced resident of East London. What do you think is happening in that photograph? And I know many of you will have come to recognised this photograph and worked out what it is. And this, of course, is a residents' consultation. Thank you for sharing that photograph. I just want to sort of mention this, and particularly if there are any residents whose landlord is one housing group at the moment, this is very important that you take heed of what's going on and that you join in the consultation. One housing group is a social landlord, and it has housing of very many different kinds. So it's housing in East London. Some of it was originally Toynbee Housing Association property. Some of it was originally was property that came over from the council. Some of it was property that Toynbee or its successor housing associations built as part of developments across East London. So it's a bit of a mix of blocks, how they all came together. I have not yet found anybody who lives in a one housing group property who is happy with how that property is owned and managed. And many of us feel that the performance of one housing group is particularly poor, and we want it improved. Back in June, and there is an article about this in East London News, one housing group announced that it was going to merge with the Riverside Housing Association. And now the formal consultation document has come out. If we could perhaps show the PDF so that people can recognise the document. This document was posted out to all one housing group residents in the last few days. It was posted in, I think, a sealed envelope so that not everyone, particularly even me, realised this was actually consultation. It looked like just another glossy brochure from One Housing Group. But this is, in fact, the detail of the proposal for how the merger with Riverside Housing Association is due to take place. And it is so history repeating itself. It's terrible. If we can just show, this is the actual consultation document that has come out. I think we've got a slide to show you what it looks like so that you can recognise it. A housing association always comes to you with a slogan a bit like "better and stronger together." They don't say things like, "Oh, we're finding it a bit hard going, so we thought we'd better get a bit bigger," do they? And there are, I think, 6 proposals this time. That's about how their stock is going to improve. They're going to give better services for customers. Well, if it's possible to give better services, what is it about a merger that makes the services even better? One Housing Group could get better services on its own without a merger. They want a louder customer voice. That's what they're offering in the merger. Well, given that One Housing Group ignores most of its residents at the moment, it could hardly be a quieter voice, could it? But it's not the louder voice that residents who transferred to One Housing Group from the council were promised. The merger will apparently provide more investment in existing and new homes. We don't want to see the existing estates knocked down and rebuilt at greater density. And there's a load of other similar stuff. They're going to invest 2.5 million each year to help communities by supporting initiatives which help people into work. We already have councils doing that. We already have FE colleges doing that. Why can't our landlords just concentrate on delivering a housing service and signposting us to professionals rather than trying to duplicate services? Why should our rent money go to paying for helping people back to work when our council tax is already paying for that service to be provided? Seems bizarre. So it's the usual set of problems. Now, One Housing Group their service is actually, I think, widely recognised by residents as being so poor. It might sound quite attractive to merge because things can only get better because they can't get any worse. But what I would say to people is remember that when One Housing Group, or when Toby Island Homes was first set up, people thought that things would get better, and we all found it very difficult, if not impossible, when they didn't get better, to improve anything. So I think caveat emptor, we have to be very careful about this, and we have to make our voices heard. And if we don't make our voices heard now, then merger or not, they never will happen. The other thing we found when we went through that exercise before was it was impossible to enforce Toynbee Housing Association and the One Housing Group to keep to the promises they had made. Nobody could actually enforce anything. And then we had quite strong support. The sting in the tail of what this merger is offering is they actually say, pledge 6, how are you going to know that we're going to keep our promises? And the answer is, we will be transparent in the delivery of these pledges by providing an annual progress report. That is not transparency. That is the tiniest of sticking plasters, really. So it really is a travesty what's being offered here. Nowhere does it say we're going to revert to what we originally promised, which is that residents would have a say in what was happening. I think residents in One Housing Group properties are fed up with being treated worse than baked bean tins who are put in uniform rows on supermarket shelves. We are people, we have lives. They are being blighted by One Housing Group, and it has to stop. Now, I don't know if we can show, I did produce a little Word document just showing the details of the consultation. This is a consultation. It is the usual consultation standard which applies in Tower Hamlets. Thank you. That's exactly what we want to see. Namely, 6 people sat in the community centre and 6 residents turn up. So we need to get more numbers out, more people out and involved in this consultation. That is the slide of the leaflet that's gone out. Go and find that. It came to you in the post within about the last week. Go and find it and read it and make your own mind up. You don't have to listen to me, but be cautious, be aware, ask questions about it. And on the back of that leaflet, you will find what we saw just a minute ago, which is how to get involved in the survey there. Those details are on the back of that leaflet. But, as it says here, you can't just go on the survey site and respond to the consultation. The letter that you got with this leaflet when it came to you in the post has got a unique code in it. And to take part in the survey, you need to get that code. If you have lost your letter or recycled it and you can't find it again, then do email One Housing Group and ask them what they're going to do about the fact you've lost your code. As it's a unique code, they can give it to you again, because obviously you're not going to use it twice because it is unique, if One Housing Group can get their heads around that. So I would urge everybody in One Housing Group property, which is a fair number across the boroughs of Tower Hamlets and Newham, go find that letter, enter it, join in the consultation. We shall keep an eye on it. The consultation ends on the 15th of October, and I think we need to make that a campaign at the moment to keep. I think residents will be campaigning anyway, but we can't just let it all slide through. So thank you for listening to that. Our numbers of listeners have kept up very well during that item, and we will continue to follow the One Housing Group consultation and see what residents feel about this suggestion and how One Housing Group explains, if it does, that it thinks services are going to improve. So that's that for this evening. Thank you for listening, because I can see that even if you haven't phoned in, I can see the numbers are showing that we have had a good number of listeners tonight. If you've enjoyed our items, please share the link to this video on your social media network so other people can hear Jingy and also can hear Rob's speech. We need to get as many people out as possible on that demonstration this Thursday in 2 days' time. So thank you for listening. We should be back on the 21st. I'm not quite sure what the topic is next week, but it might be climate change. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out on the podcast Facebook page. But anyway, we'll be back with East London's news, same time, 10 o'clock next Tuesday. Thank you and good night.